Hello Methuselahs and welcome back to Lies from the Tabletop. I'm your host MikeyNoFonts, and today I get to share with you a really awesome piece of news, and you are going to have to indulge me a little bit today because I get to share with you the fact that yes me, little old Mikey, am in fact the UK TES national champion. I know, I'm absolutely buzzing. I can't quite believe it myself. I still don't think it's quite sunk in, but today on the channel I get to share with you my journey towards picking my deck and the changes that I made towards that. Also, I get to share with you a little bit about what happened at that final table and the pressure that was on there. Other than that, though, it was an amazing day. It was fantastic to play with so many amazing players, meet some brand new people, and play some VTES, of course. But until then, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out on future videos and content. And also, if you do enjoy the video, please do leave us a little like. It helps us out a lot. But without any further ado, let's get into my deck and my deck list and the changes that I made. So if you haven't guessed it already, of course, I am going to be playing my favourite deck ever, which is Stanislava, Vote and Bleed. Of course, it was the deck that was inspired by Martin Waymeyer's 25th anniversary Decklist, and it was released as a full deck. And I took that deck, I made some changes. On the channel before, we have built a highly aggressive variant of the deck, so if you do want to go check that out, go and look at one of our previous videos. The version of the deck that I took to the UK National Championships was different again, and I tweaked it for a meta that I was expecting a little bit more as well. Something to make it a little bit more stable, obviously a lot less aggressive, but also still quite aggressive, but also some changes in there. So without further ado, let's get into the crypt. In the crypt, we have 5 Stanislava, obviously the staple of the deck. She is the boss, and she is incredible. She can do all of the multi-acting and has that, of course, built-in bleed for 2, which is absolutely invaluable. The funny thing about my journey towards the top table, though, which I haven't mentioned in any of my previous reports, is that the game win that I got to get myself to the top table, the whole game, I was contesting Stanislava. Yes, there was another Stanislava Vote and Bleed player, obviously someone of great taste, of course, but they were a fantastic player as well, and they got their Stanislava out first, so I just had to, just rock it with Xavier and Hartmut Stover as well. But I managed to do the business. I managed to get the game win, and the game win and play from myself in that moment was I cut a deal to help me oust my prey, and then at the end of the turn I went to transfers and transferred out my own Stanislava, contesting with my predator's Stanislava, shutting them down from the attack, and then I was able to press into of course my brand new prey and take that game win. So next, of course, we have the Master cards. And in here, we've got something that I like to call the acceleration engine. Yeah, of course, you are playing massive, massive vampires, so you need to get them out a lot quicker. There are 8 Zilla's Valleys, 2 Information Highways, and a Dreams of the Sphinx. I was chatting to Martin Waymeyer about our probability of opening with one of these in our opening hand, and it's at about 76%, so it's pretty optimal. The addition that is in here as well is, of course, the Barons. You don't want to be drawing those Zilla's Valleys during the late game. That's going to be... You're going to have a bad time if you do that. So they are some great ways of accelerating out your vampires. Of course, the Giant's Blood, which, again, was a really lucky draw from me as well in the final. Not in the final, in my game win that led up to the final. I did see it in the final, but of course I didn't get to play it because one of my opponents played it. And then there's the Stealth Engine, which is Backways and Monastery of Shadows. Obviously really important to be getting those stealthy actions through. And then there's something that I like to call the Blood Gain Engine, because of course we run 6 villains. Our vampires are expensive, and when we get them out, we do hurt ourselves quite a lot. So what we need to do is get some of that much needed blood back onto the vampires as well, and the best ways of doing that are through Perfectionist. They are through the Zoo Hunting Ground, through the Coven, and of course Papillon as well, which is just great for getting that blood back. We are going to be doing a lot of multi-acting with this deck, and our actions are going to cost us some pool, and sometimes we do get caught in combat and that hurts us quite a lot, but those cards allow us to get the pool back. Next we have our actions. Now, you might be thinking, well, surely Scout and Mission is just a worse version of Govern the Unaligned, and technically you might be right. However, what we are doing in this deck is a lot of multi-acting, as we'll go on to later. With 6 Govern the Unaligned and 3 Scout and Mission, what we're going to be looking to do is play a Govern the Unaligned with Stanislava, untap, and then also play Scout and Mission, because obviously we can't take the same action twice in one turn. So that's really good for getting, again, an acceleration to get that blood onto those really big vampires nice and early so that we can get them out and play with them straight away. Next, we've got our political actions, and you might notice in here there is no parity shift, and also there's a few additions from the last version of the deck, of course. We've got some Ancillary Empowerment and some Anarchist Uprising in there. Those were meta calls on the day, and they proved out to be some pretty good meta calls as well. No parity shift. I hate the card. I'm not going to go into it again. It's situational. But also, if I'm villaining back up and I'm also looking to get some early outs sometimes as well, the chances are I might be the person who's on the highest pool, and that was evident quite a few times throughout the day. So it is deck dependent. Not, blasting anyone who chooses to run parity shift. It's just the way I play the deck. I like to get a lot of that pool back before a parity shift becomes viable. But until then, we've got, of course, the Reigns of Power, we've got the Political Stranglehold, and we've got the Ancient Influence as well. Some great once per game cards, and the Reigns of Power as well. Something else that will come in a little bit later as well in the video. The next big change that I made to the deck was to do with the equipment that I'm using. I didn't know some of these cards existed when I first built the deck way over like 3 or 4 years ago when I was experimenting with it. And when I found out about the Signet of King Saul, I was like, wow, why isn't that in my deck? You know, imagine an unblockable Stanislava. You know, we play so many cards in this deck to do with stealth, and yet we can just put this card straight on it and just go straight in for the kill. And then the only thing that we have to worry about there is getting deflected. And then we also have a Helicopter. Again, really, really helps with the multi-acting in the deck. And then possibly one of the best cards in the deck, one of my most favourite cards, and it doesn't see that much play, is Seal of Vedartha. Yes, giving a Xavier Dominate is as naughty as you think it is. It really is absolutely incredible. The ability to bleed, govern bleed with Xavier, the ability to deflect with Xavier is just absolutely amazing, and also just gives a bog standard +1 bleed as well. So that is a really, really good card, and if you don't run it in your Stanislava deck, I highly encourage you to. Next, we've got some action modifiers and also the action modifier combats. We've got 6 Earth Control, 3 Force March, 3 Instantaneous Transformation, and 1 Enkel Cog. Of course, this deck, we are bringing out massive, massive vampires, and so we want to get the most value out of them possible. And the best way that we can do that is by multi-acting. So yeah, that Force March, that Freak Drive, the Instantaneous Transformation, the Enkel Cog as well is just so important to be letting our big vampires do as much as they possibly can to have an influence on the game. There were turns with Stanislava in which I bled for free and then untapped with Force March, and then I Scout and Mission down, and then I did Instantaneous Transformation, then I Govern the Unaligned down again, and then I Freak Drived, and then I attached a Signet of King Saul, and then I used Helicopter to untap again, ready to deflect again. It was it felt so naughty, but that's the point of the deck, is that we want to get as much value out of these big vampires as possible. You know, we see other decks around us getting out 4 or 5 vampires, taking 4 or 5 actions per turn. Well, we can do 4 or 5 actions per turn with one really good vampire, and this deck is powerful enough to do that. And finally, we have our combat cards. Yes, if we are a Stanislava Vote and Bleed player, we want to avoid combat as much as we can, and so that's why we run 7 Form of Mist and 5 Earth Meld. The ability to carry on with Form of Mist at +1 stealth is absolutely amazing, and that's why I run 7 of them, because I don't want to be accidentally caught trying to bleed my opponent with no stealth. I would much rather let them tap and block me, and then I go, well, actually, we're not going to have a combat. You're going to stay blocked. I'm going to carry on a +1 stealth. What are you going to do about it? Of course, we have to have some reaction cards in here, because our deck isn't that powerful that we can just ignore absolutely everybody else. That would be a nice deck to play. That might be something like Baltimore Purge or something like that. Jokes. In here, though, we do have 6 deflection because bleeds hurt. We have some second tradition domains, and we also have 2 on the QEV as well, because we want to wake and we want to be able to deflect as well. Our main form of defense is deflecting in this deck. We obviously don't want to block at all, because the pool that is on our vampires is so valuable, and we don't want to lose it all in one silly combat and basically ruin our entire game. And lastly, we've got this event, and it's a very important event. It's a very good event. Our deck does struggle against those smaller, more aggressive decks that might seek to trade off their vampires for our bigger vampires as well. So we do have a Scourge of the Enochians in here as a bit of a meta call against those decks that might try to overwhelm the board and create a lot of presence, create a lot of smaller cap vampires, and so we look to punish them with this card as well. So let's talk about the tabletop. Somehow. Yeah. Anyway, the deck got me to the final table, and the final table looked a little bit like this. We had James playing the Dirty Harry deck. It's amazing. It looks to use Mata Harry and Inside Dirt to try and take their opponent down. Obviously, with me as their prey. Then it was David with his multiple Master Phase actions. Also, in there with a very good card against me, Axinia Daklau. And then there was a friend of ours, which is Tommy, who's been on the channel as well, with the Queen Anne Baltimore Purge deck, which is a phenomenal combo in which, you know, they can send a lot of different vampires to torpor and then just diabolise them all, or better yet, steal them for herself with a Grave Robin. And then, speaking of Grave Robin as well, going into James, there is Tibor, obviously a national champion himself in the past as well, making it to the final table yet again with weenie Dragon Breath rounds, looking to steal other people's big vampires, but also looking to cause as much chaos as quickly as possible, looking to get in lots and lots of victory points as early as possible and just take the table. And it's a super aggressive deck, and it was one that was very much in our minds as we started the game. So how did I do it then? Because if you look at this table, you would think I've probably got no right to win this game whatsoever, because bleeding into me is James, and he's using Inside Dirt to bleed me. He's obviously going to bleed me for 1 at 6 stealth every single turn, and he doesn't care how big the bleed is because he bends the edge to take 3 pool away from me, and he's overwhelming the table and creating a lot of guys, creating a lot of board presence, and then just taking my pool away bit by bit. Now, what's my defense to that? Well, my defense usually is deflection. Well, you can't deflect to burn the edge and do your opponent 3 pool worth of damage. you can't deflect that. You can only deflect bleed. So I'm completely defenseless against my predator. And then I look towards my prey and I think, well, maybe I can go there and have at least a really good game, try and attack him loads. But the thing is, he's got the perfect star vampire to deal with me as a vote and bleed deck. He's got Decklist, and her card special text says that you can discard a master card and basically get a free deflection. So if I'm trying to bleed for anywhere between 3 and 6 with Stanislava, and I know he's also got Archon Investigations in there somewhere as well, so I'm obviously going to bleed responsibly. He's going to deflect every single one of my bleeds all over the gaff. And so I've got a predator that I can't defend against, I've got a prey that I can't attack, and then I look across the table and I see Tommy with his Queen Anne Baltimore Purge deck, and I know before I even sit down that he's looking at my vampires thinking my vampires are pretty tasty. He's definitely going to want to have some kind of go on my Xavier or on my Hartmut Stover, or if he's wanting to defend, he can take Mark Decker for that +1 strength as well. There's lots of options for him, and I know that he just wants to steal my vampires, so he's probably got little to no interest in negotiating with me. And then also I look across the table at Tibor, and Tibor is playing what is very much a table hate deck. If that deck is at the table, everyone on the table is going to be united in taking that deck out, basically, because it's the Weenie Dragon Breath rounds. And what happened was, I wasn't able to pretty much do anything for the first half of the game, because Tibor's not interested in negotiating with me either, because he wants to take out my prey and then take me out as quickly as possible. So yeah, that's the stage set, really. A predator that I can't defend against, a prey that I can't attack, and 2 cross-table allies that I can't really do anything with and work with them. So what do I do? As I've already said, I don't draw any of my acceleration engine. I don't see any info highways. I don't see any Zilla's Valley. And I get out a turn 4 Stanislava, and by that time, James has already really taken out of me. He's burning the edge loads. He's getting loads of free bleeds. And he's getting me down to really low pool. But by the time I get back up, I managed to stabilise a little bit and fend him off. And during that time, Tibor, with his Weenie Dragon Breath rounds deck, James is really feeling the pressure from that. Tibor is very much torpouring and diablerising some of James's guys, and Tibor doesn't really care if they're losing blood hunts, because his guys cost 1 and 2, James's costs 5, 6, or 7, and there's not really much that he could do. And also across the table from me as well, by the time I'd got myself set up and stabilised a little bit, my prey, Dave, he had Axinia Daklo out. I couldn't lead him. And Tommy had set himself up really nicely with a Baltimore Purge. And I have to decide what to do. I have to decide, well, I can't go with my cross-table allies, so I have to make a deal with my predator and my prey. So what I do is I turn to James and I say, look, you're kind of not getting through me. It's kind of worth stop trying at this point. And what we can both do is we can both turn our attention towards Tibor. Also, that allows me to stabilise a little bit more. But also, I start calling some votes. I start calling some KRCs with 3 on Tibor. Yeah, I start attacking my Grand Predator. And much to Tommy's delight as well. Tommy's really in my good books at this point. And also I start bleeding Dave, but I say to Dave, look, don't Archon Investigation this. Send me right over there. Send me to Tibor. Discard your MasterCard. Send me over to Tibor and I'll start bleeding him for 5 or 6. So that's what I start doing. And then I also call a little banishment as well on Queen Anne. And my predator and my prey both really like me at this point in time. I'm usually, if you sat next to a Stanislava deck, you're going to have a bad time. But with these two guys, we were all helping each other deal with the main threats at the table. And for once in my life, Stanislava wasn't the main threat at the table. It was Tibor with his Weenie Dragon Breath rounds, and it was Tommy with his Queen Anne deck. During this time as well, where we're trying to stabilize, and I'm trying to attack Tibor, and I'm trying to, gain some favor with James, and also really, getting Tommy's good books by doing loads of damage to his prey. Tibor does take out James, and it leaves me with a little bit of an issue, because I've got Tibor with the Weenie Dragon's Breath rounds, and he can trade his 1 or 2 cap vampires for my really big ones, and that's an issue. Also, Tommy's got a Baltimore Purge off, and he steals my Xavier, so I don't have vote control anymore. So I have to cut a deal, and the person who I've got the most favour with at the table is Tommy. And so Tommy, I turn to him and I say, look, Tibor's already got 1 victory point. If he gets another, then it's going to be really difficult for you to gain the win, the national championship win. So I managed to cut a deal with Tommy to say, let me oust Dave, because that way at least 2 of the victory points at the table have been shared, but also it stops me from dying to Tibor, and I gain that 6 pool that's going to help me stabilise yet again. And then I get Dave, and I get my first victory points, and I call 2 votes, by the way. I was sandbagging 2 KRCs, and he was on 6 pool, so I just go KRC, KRC, and Tommy obviously uses my own vampires to vote for them, which felt a little bit rude, to be honest. But yeah, so we got that first victory point. And then the next thing that happened was I passed the turn to Tommy after gaining 6 pool. And people who read the report of the game, I feel like maybe I misrepresented this a little bit unfairly. What Tommy did was he called a Reigns of Power, and that wasn't to say that that was the moment that lost Tommy the game, because looking back on it in hindsight, I still think that I could have done really well at that table, and still could have taken Tommy out, and also possibly Tibor. Tommy called a Reigns of Power, even though he was on 5 pool. He obviously needed 6 to survive it as well, because I had an 11 cap vampire. And he called it, and then he had to vote against his own vote, which was a bit unfortunate. But I think it was a little bit inconsequential, to be honest. And because Tibor was still going pretty healthy, and even if the Reigns of Power passed, I don't think it would have ousted Tibor either, and Tommy would have had to have bled into Tibor to try and take him out, at which point he could have lost some of his vampires. So we needed to do it with votes, really, and that Reigns of Power still wasn't enough to oust Tibor. But anyway, he calls the vote, and he has to vote against it, and then he kind of has to reassess what he's doing, and then he passes the turn to Tibor, at which point Tibor starts doing a lot of hunting, and he's just ousted James, and his vampires are kind of worn from that battle, and also Tommy had taken some of his vampires with the 2 Baltimore Purges that he managed to get off. And so Tibor basically has like a recovery turn, and then he hands it back to me. And that's when I sensed a bit of an opportunity. The opportunity was that because Tommy had taken a bleed to 5 for the to the face very nonchalantly from Dave in the previous turn, he also had like an untapped vampire as well, and he attempted to block it, and then there was stealth, and then the bleed for 5 went through, and I was expecting deflection, and that deflection never came. And so I didn't have vote control either. And so I knew that the only way to really get Tommy was through bleeding, at which point I thought, he could deflect me, but I had to take the gamble. I had to just gamble it that Tommy didn't draw in to another deflection between his last turn and my turn again. And so I bled Tommy for 5, and he just scooped, and I was like, whoa. So yeah, I mean, I kind of have to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back for that as a play, to just notice that Tommy was deflectionless as well, because, you know, if you are faced with a bleed to 5 and you can deflect it, you obviously do. And in the previous turn, he took a bleed for 5 and didn't deflect it, so I just went all in on that, and thankfully it worked. And then what I did was I did a little bit of cycling, some acting with my other vampires, going off with Stanislava and Helicopter as well, and that was really, really good to have drawn into Ancilla Empowerment. Obviously, Tibor is a weenie deck and has lots and lots of vampires out, and my Ancilla Empowerment hit him for 8, and that was enough for the game. I was as surprised as possibly everyone else. I think I remember looking across the table several times to Simi and also Mark Hammond from Patriot Games in Leeds, and they were looking at the situation thinking, how on earth is anyone going to get out of this? But yeah, it's all you need. You just need one window of opportunity, and you can make it if you're playing a Stanislava deck. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into my own journey, as you know, from nothing to becoming a UK VTES national champion. And I hope that this video has been insightful for you as to how I play the deck. And so there it is. That's all from today's episode of Lies from the Tabletop. I do hope that you have enjoyed the video. If you have done, please leave us a little like. It really helps the channel out. Do subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. And also leave us a little comment. Do you have any questions, or do you have any topics that you would like us to cover? But until then, goodbye, Methuselahs, and we'll see you in the next one.